Okay, and we'll go over the answers for study guide number 6. Starting at the top, it said draw a triangle MGT. So I drew a triangle over here called an MGT. Use the triangle to answer the questions below. What angle is included between segment GM and MT? So here's GM, here's MT, so it's angle M. And you might not even have to see the picture to do that, because you know that M is the point that's the same for GM and MT, so that's going to be the angle, the included angle, or the angle between them. Then the next one says, which sides include angle T? So here's angle T. T is the included angle for segment MT or segment GT and GT, or you could have said segment TM and TG. Either way you wanted to write it, that's fine. And then next, what angle is included between segment GT and GM? Again, you can see that G is the only point that's common to both of those segments, so it's angle G, but they said GT and MG, so G is between those two. It's the included angle. So the included angle is between two sides, and the included side is between two angles. We have to be able to identify that anytime we use side angle side or angle side angle. So side angle side, we have an included angle. Angle side angle, we have an included side. All right, the next one said, would you use side side side, side angle, or angle angle side to prove the triangles congruent? And write and then it says, write the congruency statement of the triangles if they are congruent. If there's not enough information to prove the triangles congruent, you're going to write not enough information. Now on this first one, what I was doing in class when I was going over this is identifying on the test. What I will do is I'll name the first one. I didn't do that on the study guide, but I'll name the first triangle. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to have a blank for, the triangle that's congruent to the one I give you, and you have a blank for which postulate or theorem it was. Well, on this first one, these aren't congruent, because at best we have side-side angle or angle side-side, and angle side-side is not a way of proving triangles congruent. It's not one of the ones up here. So in this one, on the test, you just write not enough information. You won't put what triangle is congruent, because it's not. So you just put not enough information. The triangles aren't congruent. So first look and decide, are the triangles congruent? Is there enough information? If there is, then write the congruency statement and tell me why. Like, for instance, on this one, if I wrote triangle PFE is congruent to, well, you look down here and you say, well, reflexive property, I know reflexive property, I know that segment's congruent. So because that's congruent by reflexive property, these triangles are congruent by side angle side. So I can say PFE is congruent to RFE, those two by side angle side. So that's why they're congruent. Side angle side. Now, I didn't do this on the study guide. I will on the test, and that's what I was demonstrating in class. So for our homework, all you had to do when you were working this is on these two, were they congruent? Yes. We know this segment's congruent to itself by reflexive. So they're congruent by side, side, side. And then I named them congruent triangle KMO, congruent to OLK. That's the way I named those two triangles. Now you could have them in a different order, just as long as K goes with O, M goes with L, and O goes with K. Okay, but they could be in a different order. That's the reason I'm going to give you one triangle so that everybody has the exact same answer on the test for the second triangle. Okay. The next one, number 7, we knew that this segment was congruent to itself, but still that's angle side side, angle side side. That's not one of the ways to prove triangles congruent, or side side angle if you look at it the other way. Either way, it's not enough information. Number 8, these are congruent by side, side, side. It's obvious. All three sides are marked congruent, so side, side, side. And I put triangle PAN congruent to triangle KLC. And remember, when you map around at PAN, I went down the one with the 3 hash marks, then down the one with the 1 hash mark. So I got to do the same thing here. Down the 3 hash and then the 1 hash of KLC, like that. By side, side, side. These are congruent, side angle side, side angle side, side angle side. And then I put triangle ACB congruent to DFE. You may have named them differently, but the letters should be in the same place. In other words, A should be in the same place as D, C should be in the same place as F, even if they're not ACB like that. Number 10 was not enough information. The only other thing we had would be reflexive property, and then we just got an angle on the side, angle on the side. See, if it's angle side angle, it's got to be in both triangles. It'd have to be angle side and this angle congruent to the angle side and that angle. and that's not the case, so that's not enough information. The next one is congruent because the vertical angles are congruent, so we could say side, angle, side, side, angle, side. And triangle PTF is congruent to triangle GTS, is the way I named them. And number 12 on this one, obviously it's side, 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 but we could also, if we wanted to say vertical angles are congruent, we have side, angle, side, side, angle, side. So either one of these would work for a way of proving the triangle's congruent. So triangle CDT is congruent to RDH. That's the way I wrote the congruency statement. All right, now let's do the proofs down here at the bottom. Now, what I explained in class when I was going over this is because I'm giving you some of the information and because I'm telling you how many steps they are, these should be really easy proofs. Because if you look at this one, the given is the first thing we write down. We write down the given, write in given. We know that what we're going to prove is the triangle's congruent, so we know this statement. So already you've got 1, 2, 3 of the 5 things you got to fill in, okay? So it should be really easy. And when we're proving triangles congruent, it takes 3 pieces of information. See, each one of the ways that we prove them, side, 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 angle, side, angle, side, angle, 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 side, requires 3 pieces of congruent parts of the triangles. So in this one, they already give us 2 pieces. BC is congruent to DC. BC and DC are congruent. AC and EC. AC and EC are congruent. So that's 2 of the pieces. I put stars by it because that's 2 pieces of congruent information in the given. We only need 1 more piece. And looking at the picture, we know that these angles are congruent. They tell us those angles, BCA and DCE, and why. Vertical angles are congruent. And let me stress that. You have to put vertical angles are congruent. If you just write vertical angles, I'm going to count it wrong. If you put definition of vertical angles, I'm going to count it wrong. It should say vertical angles are congruent, okay? Because the definition of vertical angles does not say anything about them being congruent. And if you just write vertical angles, you're not telling me that vertical angles are congruent. See, this was a theorem called the vertical angle theorem. That's the only other acceptable reason here. If you put vertical angle theorem, I think it's easier just to put vertical angles are congruent than write vertical angle theorem. And then these 2 triangles were congruent by side, angle, side, side, angle, side. So you had to put that in, side, angle, side postulate. All right, the next proof. Here's the picture. Here's the given. The given tells us that we have 2 segments that are parallel. WX is parallel to YZ, and they're congruent. So notice they've marked them congruent. They've marked them parallel with the arrows, okay? Now, that they're congruent, that's one of the pieces of information I need, but I need 2 other pieces. And here they're giving us a hint here. Parallel lines always help us prove angles congruent, either alternate interior angles congruent, or corresponding angles congruent, or alternate exterior angles congruent, right? That's what they always help us prove. Since we're proving triangles congruent, we have to have congruent angles, and that's what they're going to help us with in these proofs. So they give me these 2 angles are congruent. I have them marked over here on the picture. WXZ, YZX, they're congruent. Why? Because parallel lines form congruent alternate interior angles. And you have to write that. Or you could put, some people put parallel lines prove alternate interior angles congruent. That's fine. Then the only thing I need, I have a side and angle, side and angle. I need the 3rd side, which is reflexive property. ZX is congruent to XZ. It does reverse if you look at the names of these. See, in the triangle XZ is congruent to ZX, so it reverses in this case. So I wrote them reverse, and then there's my 3 pieces of information. This pair of sides, this pair of angles, and this pair of sides. So the triangles are congruent, and the triangles are congruent by side, angle, side, side, angle, side. So side, angle, side postulate is why they're congruent, okay? And I told you, reflexive property is your best friend. All the homework that I gave you and everything else you notice, reflexive property shows up in a lot of our proofs. Okay, on the back side, number 15, only 3 steps long. We write the given down. The given gives us 2 pieces of congruent information, those angles and those sides. These 2 angles, these 2 sides, and then they tell us the reasons vertical angles are congruent. Well, what are the vertical angles? They're angles LMO and NMP. Or you could have said OML and OMN. Make sure you're naming the angles that are in the triangle when you name them. So I put LMO is congruent to NMP, Vertical angles are congruent. And then that's my third piece of information. 1, 2, 3. 3 things that are congruent. These triangles are congruent by angle, angle, side theorem. Angle, angle, side, angle, angle, side. That's a theorem. The others are postulates. Okay, number 16. They start us off by telling us that angle B and D are right angles. That's in the given. B and D, these are right angles. They've marked them for us. Okay, they're right angles. But remember, we have to say things are congruent. Okay, so they're right angles. So the next thing we say is that they are congruent, and they tell us all right angles are congruent. That's one of our reasons. The other thing they give me in the given is that AE bisects BD. So AE bisects BD. BD is the one that's being bisected. So the two segments that will be congruent are BC and DC. You name them that way because that's how they are in the triangles. That's how they correspond. So segment BC is congruent to segment DC. Definition of segment bisector. Okay. And now we only need one more piece of information, the vertical angles. I say the vertical angles here, name them. Vertical angles are congruent. And then I have angle, side, angle is why the triangles are congruent. So see, when we start, we know this, we can fill in this blank, and this blank as soon as we start. And then we figure out the logic behind the rest of it. And the first thing you do is address the given. What does the given mean? Write down that. Okay. Is there something else that the given? Yes, write that down. Then once we've written down everything the given tells us, then we look at the picture and write down what it tells us. Vertical angles are congruent. Number 17, short, sweet, really simple. You write down these two pairs of angles that are congruent that they already have marked for you on the picture. All we needed was a side, one more piece of given information, or one more piece of congruent information. GF congruent to FG, it reverses. And the triangles were congruent by angle, angle, side theorem. Hopefully everybody got these right, you know, the first time when you were working. And then number 18. This is what number 18 looks like. It's 6 steps long. They didn't tell me anything was congruent in the given this time. See, when they tell me things are congruent, I only have one piece. I'm going to have to show all 3 parts or all 3 pieces of congruent information to help me prove the triangle's congruent. So we'll address this first part. JM bisects angle J. Well, here's JM. It's bisecting the angle J, so these two angles will be congruent. So I named those KJM congruent to LJM. Okay. By definition of angle bisector, they did give me the reason. So we knew it had to be congruent angles because definition of angle bisector splits an angle into 2 congruent angles. So there's one piece of congruent information. Now, we talked about this before. Whenever they tell me 2 segments are perpendicular, and they're telling me JM is perpendicular to KL, there's going to be 2 statements that I have to make. 2 statements. First, when they're perpendicular, they form right angles, and the angles are LJ or LMJ and angle KMJ are right angles. These 2 angles are right angles. Okay? That's definition of perpendicular segments or definition of perpendicular lines, either way you want to write it. Now, if they're right angles, those same angles are congruent. They're congruent because all right angles are congruent. All right angles, have the same measure, 90, so all right angles are congruent. So now there's my second pair of congruent pieces. I got this pair of angles, this pair of angles. All I need now is reflexive property. And in these 2 triangles, JM is congruent to JM. It doesn't flip around or anything. That's reflexive property. So then the triangles are congruent by angle, side, angle. Angle, side, angle postulate. So all we have to do in these is write down the given. We know what we're trying to prove, okay, because it says prove. So that's going to be the last statement in these proofs. And then you have to just figure out the logic and how did they go from the given, write down all the pieces of information you know until you've got enough to prove those triangles congruent. So that's the study guide. The test is a lot like this, of course, different proofs, still using some of the same reasons in those proofs, but that's the answers.